this is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Emerald, once again working in partnership with the HD Base T Alliance here at InfoComm 2024. Topic of conversation here today is high-impact meeting spaces, how to create them, how to optimize them. We have a group of three great panelists with us here today. Thank you so much for being here. Scott Sullivan from Shure, Joel Mulpeter from Crestron, Vicki Sanville from LG. Really appreciate your perspective. Thank you again for being part of this conversation. Let's start kind of with definitions. Let's start with first things. What makes a meeting space high impact? Whether it's a corporate meeting space, whether it's an education meeting space. If you say this is a high impact space, what does that say about that space? What does it mean?
So high impact space to me, I probably take it from the educational perspective or the federal government perspective. It's making sure whether you're in the room or outside of the room, every single aspect of a learning outcome or a mission critical situation or topic is clearly understood. Every participant in that meeting is able to have a true voice and feel like a participant. There are action items that can be acted upon after that meeting, and they felt like it was actually a successful discussion, right? So this isn't, people coming in from home and just kind of sitting there, screen goes off. They are, you see social expression, you see engagement, you allow people to not cut in, but, raise their hand and have a back and forth conversation. And so, again, bringing kind of that meaningfulness back into a meeting instead of any participant in that meeting going, this is just another meeting on my calendar. So that's what I would say.
What would you add, Joel?
Yeah, we tend to, when we're talking to end users about high impact spaces, we're usually describing as those spaces that are high impact to the business. Now, that's obviously an important space to their workflow and what happens every day in that facility. But it's also one that is typically large in real estate, right? Open spaces, large boardrooms, training rooms, all these kind of things where large groups of people gather, right? That high impact becomes the cost of the business for the real estate, the cost of the people gathering. So the technology needs to support that high impact space and the high impact approach to the business. Always work, be the best experience, and deliver the outcomes that people in the space are looking for.
Scott?
Yes, thank you. I think there's some really good points that were just touched on. One thing I would add to that is, that premium space Joe was mentioning is really important, and also making sure nothing goes wrong, like Vicki mentioned, is having that connection as we had talked about different brands coming together in that space and making sure that that meeting gets pulled off at the highest level and optimized for everybody. Those are on the far end, those in the room, and also with different stimuli, right? Whether it be a smart board, whether it be people moving around, using different products. How do you optimize that and make sure you're getting the most out of that space? And sometimes those spaces are very agile. Today it's a meeting room for 20 people. Tomorrow it's a smaller meeting room. How do you keep up with the pace of those meeting spaces? Because they are premium, they are high impact, and we have to have the agility to come in there with all the right solutions.
And that really is the perfect segue to my next question, which is must-have solutions, technology needs in high-impact spaces. I'm thinking about camera tracking technology, interactive displays, software, interactive smart boards, multi-zone audio. That just scratches the surface. What would you say are some of the most critical technology elements of a high-impact space, whatever vertical you might want to focus on, or in general?
Yeah, I'll just take that one from the standpoint of microphones and connecting to all the other products. So one of the things early on when we started getting into this business, we realized we needed to connect with camera companies, other companies to make sure that our microphones were being heard. There was a high level of intelligibility and making sure that we played nice. So the whole partnership of us in this space with other companies is extremely important.
We tend to think of those spaces as needing three core, pillars or three core needs. And that's really content, collaboration and control. When we're talking collaboration, it's the in-room collaboration is super important in these spaces, right? You want to share content from laptops, from devices, from other sources in the room. Typically, these are big rooms, right? So, the way that content goes on displays, on many displays, is really important. From a conferencing standpoint, that content needs to get out to the people on the far end, but so does the feeling of being in the room. So that's a play on the audio side of things. It needs to be captured clearly and articulately. And then we also need to capture people visually in the room as well, using multicam and other things in those spaces. And then from a control perspective, these are complex spaces, right? There's a lot of things happening. If they're hard to use, that people are not going to enjoy using them. They need to be simple to use. So that control piece is super important, that anyone can walk in that room, simply hopefully hit a button and start it, and maybe select some basic options and get a great experience out of that room. So again, it's really that collaboration, in-person, conferencing, which brings in the remote or hybrid aspect to it, and then the control aspect as well to make it easy to use.
Yeah, and what I just would add is interoperability. From a hardware perspective, there's so many parts and pieces in these types of rooms, and you want to kind of set it and forget it. So from a hardware manufacturer perspective, we've got all these accessories that go into these conferencing spaces, into these meeting rooms, into these secure environments, and we have to make sure that we're working with all of our collaboration partners, from like kind of a 1-2 step. So if you think about meeting spaces in general, it's beyond just, Microsoft Teams now. We're seeing a lot of growth in Chrome. We're seeing a lot of growth in Zoom, and making sure that not maybe just your hardware build in from the system on chip technology, but making sure you've got mini PCs that can slot into hardware, not adding additional pieces that you can lose, right, in a conference room, but making sure that the ease of use can be set up for any scenario.
And I also wanted to ask you, Vicki, about interactive smart boards. I think that's something that's particularly germane to high-impact spaces. Do you want to take the lead on that?
Sure. No, so interactive boards, they are growing in popularity, actually in corporate environments. You see what's going on in the education space. There was a lot of uptick in IFPs. But in education now, there's more diversity in the learning spaces and the training spaces. So you're bringing back in LCD, you're bringing in projectors, you're making sure the casting capabilities are working there. And then on the corporate side, what's happening is corporations are going, okay, I need my teams to collaborate. And collaboration doesn't mean looking at a screen. It means getting up, walking around, working in small groups, coming back together and seeing what we've kind of, what are the options we've brought to resolve. And so it's really important. Everybody dismisses IFPs in the corporate market, in the federal market, and that is where we're seeing increased adoption with the product mix in the meeting space to make sure that we're enhancing that collaboration.
So the next thing I want to turn to is bring your own meeting. I think that's something that also is particularly germane to high-impact spaces. Capabilities as regards BYOM, their role in high-impact spaces. Any thoughts about that, Joel?
Yeah, we still see in these spaces, a need for a codec in the room quite often, but to have that need for that percentage of meetings that are not on that platform or that codec, right? So to allow people to bring in a soft codec and make that same experience, all the greatness of that room with the technology that was purpose-built and designed for that room, but on the platform of choice, right? That could be, any soft codec running on a laptop, but we want them to. We design technology for a room. It's designed for the room for a purpose. If that then BYOM experience or BYOD experience is diminished because it can't integrate with the room, that's a problem. It should be as good of an experience. So we do see that as super important in those spaces, as important as the code that's in the room anyway, permanently.
The only thing I would add to both questions, actually, the question that Vicki answered, I'd say as we start to see more and more people move around, like not a traditional meeting, and we start to see these behaviors, it's up to companies like us that are making microphones and connecting to improved intelligibility where they're not necessarily facing either the camera or they're in a corner where sound might get muffled, is we need to keep up with that and make sure that whether it be our DSP platforms or microphone platforms, connect to camera tracking and go with the trends that are happening here, because meetings are changing. And then back to bring your own meeting, the same thing. You have to be ready for anything to happen in that meeting space because of what your original question was in the high impact. High impact should cover all of these definitions and be ready for all of them.
No, you're 100% right. So as we begin to close up the conversation, finish up the conversation, I want to ask about a piece of actionable advice, coming from Shure's perspective, or Crestron's or LG's. What would you bring to the table for integrators or consultants or end users who are thinking about maximizing their high-impact spaces or really leaning into them? What advice would you give?
I would say integration with partners and saying that, whatever that hardware or that software is, that we're going to integrate with the audio, with the control surfaces, with the smart boards. We're bringing that piece to the puzzle so your meetings can be heard and can connect really quickly and in an agile way, regardless of what that type of meeting is and what the type of equipment that are being used in that particular time frame.
Yeah, I think my piece of advice is, these rooms have many different scenarios, many different workflows and ways to work. That can be a dangerous road to go down because it's a lot of adjustments you need to make, a lot of things you need to account for. So, it's really looking at the workflows of that space, highlighting the most commonly used ones and really focusing on those in the early stages. Designing flexibility in to go further, of course, but making sure that, the workflows of that room are really defined early and the most common ones are defined early, and then really hone in on those. People use rooms for all sorts of things. We want them to do that, but at the end of the day, if there's 20 different use cases, that increases the complexity of the space, by quite a lot. So,
yeah, my last piece of advice would be get into that room or that space early in the design discussion. We're seeing that trend in the last 5 years where, really when you're designing these spaces, MEP is always thought about and AV is an afterthought along with furniture. But in meeting spaces, whatever that meeting space definition is, furniture and audiovisual technology is becoming the most important part of that room design. So at LG, we've really invested in our specifier team to work with consultants. And we also bring in specialty integration partners that work on specific spaces where it's mission critical. So we've got command and control specialty partners, we've got education specialty partners to meet all those variety needs, and we make sure that it executes with success. So get in early, and we're happy to do it with you.